Sometimes the greatest victories come disguised as the most humiliating defeats. Sometimes being thrown out on your face is exactly where you need to land. And, sometimes, when the whole world watches you fail, that's when you finally discover what you're truly capable of. Dr. Sarah Chen thought she knew exactly how her story would end, with handcuffs, headlines, and a career destroyed by a single moment of defiance. She never imagined that moment would be the beginning of something that would shake the foundations of everything humanity thought it knew about itself. This is the story of how disgrace became triumph, how exile became homecoming, and how one woman's refusal to stay silent changed the course of human history forever. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead like angry wasps as Dr. Sarah Chen packed her personal belongings into a cardboard box that had once held printer paper. 23 years of groundbreaking research, 3 Nobel Prize nominations, and countless sleepless nights dedicated to pushing the boundaries of human knowledge, all of it reduced to a few framed photos, a coffee-stained notebook, and a small succulent plant that had somehow survived on her windowsill despite her complete inability to remember to water it. Dr. Chen, security is waiting, Director Matthews announced from the doorway, his voice carrying the uncomfortable weight of a man who had once called her his greatest asset. Now he couldn't even look her in the eye. Sarah didn't respond immediately. She continued carefully wrapping her desk lamp in yesterday's newspaper, reading headlines about budget cuts and political scandals while avoiding the one story she knew would be dominating tomorrow's front page. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from a rage so pure it felt like electricity coursing through her veins. The Prometheus Research Facility had been her second home for over 2 decades. She knew every squeaky door, every temperamental coffee machine, every shortcut through the labyrinthine corridors that connected the various departments. She had discovered 3 new energy sources here, revolutionized plasma dynamics, and developed the theoretical framework that made humanity's first successful fusion reactor possible. The very building seemed to pulse with the energy of discovery, of human potential unleashed. And now they were throwing her out like yesterday's garbage because she refused to weaponize her life's work. Sarah, Dr. Marcus Webb stepped into the office, closing the door behind him despite Matthew's disapproving glare. Marcus had been her research partner for 15 years, her closest friend, and, lately, something more complicated that neither of them had been brave enough to define. You don't have to do this. Just apologize to the committee. Tell them you were emotional, that you misspoke. They'll reinstate you by Monday. Sarah finally looked up from her packing. Marcus's face was a map of concern and exhaustion, dark circles under his brown eyes, stubble that suggested he'd been too worried to shave, worry lines that hadn't been there a week ago. She wanted to reach out and smooth those lines away, to tell him everything would be fine, but she couldn't bring herself to lie to the one person who had always believed in her vision. You know I can't do that, she said quietly, returning to her methodical packing. You were there, Marcus. You heard what General Morrison wanted us to do with the quantum resonance drives. It was just theoretical discussion about turning our clean energy research into a weapon capable of destabilizing entire planetary cores. Sarah's voice rose despite her efforts to stay calm. They want to take something beautiful, something that could solve humanity's energy crisis forever, and turn it into the ultimate tool of destruction. Matthews cleared his throat impatiently. Dr. Chen, we really must give us a moment, Marcus said firmly, and something in his tone made the director retreat to the hallway. When they were alone, Marcus moved closer, his voice dropping to an urgent whisper. Sarah, listen to me. If you walk out that door, if you make this stand, they won't just fire you. They'll destroy you. Your security clearance, your reputation, your ability to work anywhere in the field, gone. Is your pride really worth sacrificing everything you've worked for? Sarah stopped packing and really looked at him. Marcus Webb had always been the practical one, the voice of reason that kept her wilder theories grounded in scientific reality. But there was something in his eyes now that she'd never seen before: fear. Not for his career or the project, but for her. The realization hit her like a physical blow. You think I'm doing this out of pride? She asked. I think you're doing this because you've spent so long fighting for your principles that you've forgotten how to pick your battles. This isn't the hill to die on, Sarah. Not when we're so close to completing the prototype. Once we prove the technology works, once we show the world what clean fusion can do, then we can worry about preventing its misuse. Sarah closed the cardboard box and picked it up, feeling the weight of her former life in her hands. The succulent shifted slightly, its tiny leaves rustling with the movement. She'd rescued that plant from a dying colleague's office years ago, never expecting it to outlive her career at Prometheus. "You want to know the difference between us, Marcus," she said, walking toward the door. "You believe that good science can survive in an evil system long enough to change it from the inside. I believe that evil systems corrupt everything they touch, no matter how pure the original intention." She paused at the threshold, looking back at the office that had been her sanctuary. The walls were covered with whiteboards still bearing equations from their last breakthrough session, elegant formulas that described how to harness the power of stars themselves. In the wrong hands, those same equations could snuff out stars. The quantum resonance drives aren't just a power source, Marcus. They're a window into the fundamental forces that hold the universe together. And General Morrison wants to use that window to throw rocks through it. I won't be part of that. Not for my career, not for the project, and not even for you. Marcus's face crumpled slightly, and she knew she'd wounded him. But she also knew he understood. He'd always understood her, even when he disagreed with her choices. The walk down the corridor felt like a funeral march. Her heels clicked against the polished floors, echoing off walls lined with portraits of Nobel laureates and breakthrough moments in scientific history. Soon, she realized, her own portrait would be taken down from the quantum dynamics wing, leaving behind a rectangular patch of slightly darker paint as the only evidence she'd ever been here. Other researchers peered out of their offices as she passed, some with sympathy, others with the careful blankness of people trying not to get too close to a scandal. Dr. Jennifer Walsh from the Materials Science Department gave her a subtle thumbs up when no one was looking. Professor Hendricks from Theoretical Physics mouthed calmly and pointed to his business card on the bulletin board. Even in disgrace, she wasn't entirely alone. The security guards were waiting by the main entrance, two men in dark suits who looked like they'd stepped out of a government recruiting poster. Sarah recognized the type, former military, trained to follow orders without question, probably decent people doing an indecent job because someone had to pay the bills. "Ma'am, we need to escort you off the premises," the taller guard said, not unkindly. "Standard procedure." "I understand," Sarah replied, shifting the box to one arm so she could reach for her ID badge. 23 years of unrestricted access to humanity's most advanced research facility, and it all came down to a plastic rectangle with a magnetic strip. She held it out to the guard, who clipped it to a growing collection of surrendered badges on his belt. The automatic doors slid open with a soft hiss, revealing the outside world she'd barely seen during the past 6 months of intensive research. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that reminded her of the plasma fields they'd been studying. Somewhere in that vast expanse of space, stars were being born and dying, their fusion fires lighting up the darkness with the same forces she'd learned to harness in a laboratory. Dr. Chen, Director Matthews appeared beside her as she stepped onto the sidewalk. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry it came to this. You're one of the most brilliant minds I've ever worked with." "But not brilliant enough to trust with my own discoveries," Sarah replied without bitterness. She was beyond anger now, settling into a strange kind of peace that came with making an irreversible choice. "The world isn't as simple as you want it to be," Matthews said. "Sometimes we have to compromise our ideals to serve the greater good." Sarah looked back at the Prometheus facility, its glass and steel structure gleaming in the dying light. Through the windows, she could see researchers working late into the evening, driven by the same passion for discovery that had once consumed her. How many of them, she wondered, would face the same choice she had? How many would choose differently? "The greater good," she repeated thoughtfully. "You know, Director, I used to think the greater good meant pushing the boundaries of human knowledge as far as possible, consequences be damned. But I've learned something important over the past week. The greater good isn't about what we discover. It's about what we choose to do with what we discover." She turned and walked toward her car, leaving Matthews standing alone on the steps of the facility. The cardboard box felt heavier with each step, not because of its physical weight, but because of everything it represented, the end of one chapter of her life, and the terrifying uncertainty of what came next. As she drove away from Prometheus for the last time, Sarah caught sight of the facility in her rearview mirror. The building seemed to glow against the darkening sky, a beacon of human ambition and ingenuity. But she knew that inside those walls, decisions were being made that could alter the course of human civilization forever. And she was no longer part of those decisions. Her phone buzzed with incoming messages, reporters who had somehow gotten her number, colleagues expressing support or condolences, and a single text from Marcus: "Whatever happens next, know that you're not alone." Some of us still believe in doing the right thing, even when it costs us everything. Sarah smiled despite herself, feeling something she hadn't experienced in weeks: hope. She'd lost her job, her security clearance, and probably her career in mainstream science. But she'd kept something far more valuable: her integrity, and her refusal to let fear override her principles. The road ahead was dark and uncertain, but, for the first time in months, she felt like she was finally heading in the right direction. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new choices, and new opportunities to prove that sometimes the greatest discoveries come not from what we create, but from what we refuse to destroy. Little did she know that her moment of greatest professional failure was about to become the catalyst for humanity's next evolutionary leap. The real story was just beginning. 3 months after her disgrace at Prometheus, Dr. Sarah Chen was living in a converted garage behind a small house in suburban Phoenix, Arizona. The transition from world-class research facility to makeshift laboratory had been jarring, but Sarah had discovered something unexpected in her exile: freedom. Without committees to answer to, grants to justify, or military overseers breathing down her neck, she could pursue pure science for the first time in decades. The garage laboratory was a testament to resourcefulness and determination. Workbenches made from folding tables lined the walls, supporting an eclectic collection of salvaged equipment, jury-rigged instruments, and computers that hummed constantly to keep the cooling systems running in the desert heat. Sarah had spent her savings and cashed in every favor to assemble this unlikely research facility, but it was hers, completely and utterly. The most important piece of equipment sat in the center of the space, a miniaturized quantum resonance chamber that she'd built from memory and spare parts. It was barely the size of a microwave oven, a far cry from the massive installations at Prometheus, but it was theoretically capable of producing the same results. If her calculations were correct, this modest device could generate clean fusion reactions that would make fossil fuels obsolete overnight. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a former colleague from the Materials Science Department, had arrived 2 weeks ago with a truck full of specialized components and a termination letter from Prometheus. Apparently, asking too many questions about Dr. Chen's research had made her a security risk. Now she was perched on a stool, adjusting the magnetic field generators with the precision of a master craftsman. "Containment field is stable," Elena announced, monitoring readings on a tablet connected to the resonance chamber. "Plasma temperature is holding at 47 million degrees Celsius. We're ready for the next phase." Sarah nodded, her attention focused on a three-dimensional hologram floating above her main computer terminal. The hologram showed the quantum structure they were attempting to create: a stable fusion reaction contained within a magnetic bottle no larger than a softball. It looked deceptively simple, like a glowing sphere wrapped in ribbons of colored light, but Sarah knew it represented years of theoretical work and millions of failed simulations. "Initiating hydrogen injection," Sarah announced, her finger hovering over the activation key. This was the moment of truth. Either the resonance chamber would create a sustainable fusion reaction, proving that her theoretical work could translate into practical technology, or it would fail spectacularly and probably take half the garage with it. She pressed the key. For a moment, nothing visible happened. The chamber hummed quietly, its displays showing a steady increase in internal temperature and pressure. Then, gradually, a soft blue-white glow began to emanate from the central core. The light was beautiful, almost hypnotic, like capturing a piece of the sun and holding it in a bottle. "Fusion reaction established," Elena breathed, her voice filled with wonder. "Sarah, we did it. We actually did it." But Sarah wasn't celebrating yet. She watched the readouts carefully, noting the energy input versus output ratios, the stability of the magnetic containment, and the purity of the fusion byproducts. Everything looked perfect, too perfect. After months of setbacks and near misses, success felt almost anticlimactic. Sustained reaction for 30 seconds and counting, Elena reported. Energy output is exceeding input by a factor of 12. Sarah, this is incredible. We've created a net positive fusion reaction in a garage. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. They'd done more than create a fusion reaction, they'd proven that clean, unlimited energy was not only possible but could be achieved with relatively simple technology. This wasn't some massive industrial installation that required billions of dollars and government oversight. This was something that could be built anywhere, by anyone with sufficient knowledge and determination. The implications were staggering. Every home could have its own fusion generator. Every electric car could run for decades without refueling. Space exploration could become as routine as air travel. Humanity could finally break free from the cycle of resource scarcity that had driven so much conflict throughout history. 2 minutes and, still stable, Elena announced. Sarah, we need to document everything. The world needs to see this. Sarah's smile faded slightly. Documentation meant evidence, and evidence meant that eventually, someone would come looking for them. The same forces that had driven her from Prometheus would not simply allow this technology to develop freely. There was too much money, too much power, and too much political control tied up in existing energy infrastructure. First, we need to understand exactly what we've created, Sarah said, beginning to shut down the reaction. And then, we need to figure out how to protect it. The fusion reaction died away gradually, the beautiful blue-white glow fading until only the soft hum of cooling systems remained. But the data remained, stored in their computers, proof that a new age was possible. Over the following weeks, they refined the process, documenting every variable and testing the limitations of their miniaturized fusion chamber. Sarah kept meticulous notes, knowing that this research would someday need to survive without her. If something happened to her, if she was silenced or discredited, the knowledge had to endure. Elena proved invaluable, not just for her technical expertise but for her connections to other researchers who had been marginalized by the military-industrial complex. Slowly, carefully, they began reaching out to colleagues who could be trusted scientists who valued knowledge over profit, innovation over control. Dr. James Wright, a brilliant nuclear physicist who had been blacklisted for opposing weapons research, arrived from Berkeley with a van full of sensing equipment. Dr. Amara Okafor, a quantum mechanics expert who had been forced out of MIT for refusing to sign a non-disclosure agreement, flew in from Nigeria with revolutionary new approaches to magnetic confinement. One by one, the most innovative minds in fusion research began converging on Sarah's garage laboratory. It was Dr. Okafor who made the next crucial breakthrough. While reviewing Sarah's resonance equations, she noticed something that had been hidden in the mathematical complexity, a secondary harmonic that suggested the quantum field effects were more profound than anyone had realized. Sarah, look at this, Amara said one evening, projecting her calculations onto the main display. The quantum resonance isn't just creating fusion reactions. It's actually manipulating the fundamental force that holds atomic nuclei together. Do you understand what this means? Sarah studied the equations, her excitement building as she grasped the implications. We're not just creating a new energy source. We're discovering a new way to interact with matter at the quantum level. Exactly. With the right modifications, this technology could do far more than generate power. We could transmute elements, manipulate gravitational fields, even affect the flow of time at a localized level. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed this revelation. They had stumbled upon something far more significant than clean energy, they had found a window into the fundamental forces that govern reality itself. Dr. Wright was the first to speak. This changes everything. This isn't just about replacing fossil fuels anymore. This is about giving humanity access to the building blocks of the universe. Sarah felt a familiar mixture of excitement and dread. Every major scientific breakthrough came with this moment, the realization that knowledge once gained could never be unknown, and that the consequences would ripple outward in ways impossible to predict or control. We need to be very careful about how we proceed, she said slowly. This technology in the wrong hands could be more dangerous than nuclear weapons. We're talking about the ability to manipulate matter and energy at the most fundamental level. Elena nodded grimly. Which means we need to decide something very important, very quickly. Do we publish this openly, making it available to everyone including those who would misuse it? Or do we keep it secret, controlling its development but risking that it never reaches the people who could benefit from it? Before anyone could answer, the lights in the garage suddenly went out. Emergency lighting kicked in a moment later, casting eerie shadows across the laboratory. Sarah's first instinct was to check the fusion chamber, but the emergency shutdown protocols had activated automatically, safely containing any residual reaction. Power outage? Dr. Wright asked, but, even as he spoke, they could hear the hum of electrical devices throughout the neighborhood. Only their garage had lost power. Sarah moved to the window and peered through the blinds. 3 black SUVs were parked on the street outside, their occupants sitting motionless in the darkness. As she watched, a 4th vehicle pulled up, and several figures in dark clothing began approaching the house. "They found us," Elena whispered. Sarah's mind raced through possibilities. They could try to run, but the exits were probably already covered. They could try to destroy the research, but that would mean losing months of irreplaceable work. Or they could stand their ground and hope that public attention would protect them from whatever these visitors had planned. A loud knock echoed through the garage. "Dr. Chen, this is Agent Harrison with the Department of Energy. We need to speak with you about your research activities." Sarah looked around at her colleagues, brilliant minds who had risked their careers and reputations to pursue pure science, only to find themselves cornered by the same forces they'd tried to escape. But there was something in their faces that surprised her. Instead of fear, she saw determination. Instead of resignation, she saw defiance. "Dr. Chen," the voice called again. "We know you're in there. We're not going away." Sarah straightened her shoulders and walked toward the door. She had been escorted out in disgrace once before, but this time was different. This time, she wasn't alone. This time, she had proof that humanity's future could be brighter than its past. And, this time, she was ready to fight for it. "Elena," she said quietly, "start the emergency upload protocol. Everything we've learned needs to reach the outside world." "Already on it," Elena replied, her fingers flying over the keyboard. Sarah reached for the door handle, knowing that whatever happened next would determine not just her fate, but the fate of the most important discovery in human history. The real test was about to begin. Agent Harrison was not what Dr. Sarah Chen had expected. Instead of the stern-faced government enforcer she'd imagined, he was a soft-spoken man in his 50s with kind eyes and an apologetic demeanor. He sat across from her in the small living room adjoining the garage laboratory, declining the offered coffee while his team conducted their search with unusual care and respect. "Dr. Chen, I want you to understand that this isn't a raid," Agent Harrison explained, setting down a thick manila folder on the coffee table between them. "We're here because 3 days ago, something extraordinary happened that we believe is connected to your research." Sarah remained silent, watching as Elena, Dr. Wright, and Dr. Okafor were questioned separately by other agents. The emergency upload protocol had completed successfully before the agents arrived, meaning that their fusion research was now safely distributed across multiple servers worldwide. Whatever happened next, the knowledge would survive. Agent Harrison opened the folder and withdrew a series of satellite photographs. These images were taken by our Deep Space Monitoring Station in Alaska. I need you to look at them very carefully and tell me if you recognize anything. The first photograph showed what appeared to be empty space, just the usual scatter of distant stars against the cosmic void. But, as Sarah studied the image more closely, she noticed something unusual: a faint geometric pattern in the background, almost like a grid of lines too regular to be natural. "I'm not sure what I'm looking at," Sarah said honestly. "This is the Proxima Centauri system," Agent Harrison explained. 4.2 light-years from Earth. 3 days ago, our sensors detected massive energy signatures from this region, signatures that match theoretical models for advanced fusion technology. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. That's impossible. Even if someone had developed fusion technology capable of interstellar detection, the light from those reactions would take over 4 years to reach us. Agent Harrison pulled out another photograph, this one showing the same region of space but, with a clearly visible structure, a massive geometric framework surrounding a bright central point. This image was taken 2 hours after the first one. Dr. Chen, something is building a structure around Proxima Centauri, and it's building it faster than the speed of light. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. The quantum resonance technology she developed wasn't just capable of creating fusion reactions, it was apparently capable of manipulating spacetime itself in ways that allowed faster-than-light communication or construction. Someone, or something, was using principles similar to her research on a scale that dwarfed anything humanity had ever conceived. "You think this is connected to my work?" Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. "Dr. Chen, 6 months ago, you were working on quantum resonance drives at Prometheus. 3 months ago, you were fired for refusing to weaponize your research. 2 weeks ago, our deep space monitors began detecting quantum signatures emanating from this garage. And, 3 days ago, we observed what appears to be a megastructure being constructed around the nearest star system to Earth using technology that matches your theoretical models." Agent Harrison leaned forward, his expression intense but not threatening. "We need to know everything about your research, not because we want to suppress it, but because humanity may be about to make first contact with something that already understands principles we're just beginning to discover." Sarah felt the world shifting around her, like the moment when a scientific theory suddenly clicks into place and reveals a completely new understanding of reality. The fusion technology, the quantum resonance effects, the manipulation of fundamental forces, it had all been leading to this moment. "Agent Harrison," she said carefully, "before I share anything with you, I need to know something. Are you here to continue the weapons development that I refused to participate in at Prometheus?" The agent shook his head firmly. "Dr. Chen, the situation has moved far beyond terrestrial concerns about energy or weapons. If there's an intelligence out there that can build megastructures around stars in a matter of hours, then our usual approaches to national security are completely obsolete. We need to understand this technology not to weaponize it, but to ensure that humanity can survive what's coming." Over the next several hours, Sarah walked Agent Harrison through her research, explaining the theoretical foundations of quantum resonance technology and demonstrating the miniaturized fusion chamber. With each revelation, the agent's expression became more amazed and more troubled. "Dr. Chen," he said finally, "I think we need to contact some very important people. And I think we need to do it immediately." The next 24 hours passed in a blur of phone calls, video conferences, and hastily arranged meetings. Sarah found herself teleconferencing with world leaders, addressing emergency sessions of the United Nations Security Council, and explaining quantum physics to presidents and prime ministers who had never taken a science class. The story that emerged was both thrilling and terrifying. The quantum resonance technology wasn't just creating fusion reactions, it was sending ripples through what physicists called the quantum vacuum, the underlying fabric of reality itself. Those ripples apparently served as a kind of signal, announcing to anyone capable of detecting them that a new civilization had achieved a crucial technological milestone. Dr. Okafor, working with a team of hastily assembled experts from around the world, made the next crucial discovery. The geometric patterns around Proxima Centauri weren't random construction, they were a message, encoded in the quantum signatures that the monitoring stations had detected. Someone was trying to communicate with Earth. The message, when finally decoded, was breathtakingly simple: "Congratulations on achieving quantum resonance technology. You are now ready for the next phase of development. Prepare for contact." Sarah stood on the observation deck of the newly established Joint Quantum Research Facility, watching as the most brilliant minds in human science worked together to understand and respond to humanity's first contact with extraterrestrial intelligence. The facility had been built around her garage laboratory, expanding outward in concentric rings until it resembled a high-tech campus dedicated to unlocking the mysteries of the universe. It had been 6 weeks since Agent Harrison's visit, and the world had changed in ways that few could have imagined. The threat of energy scarcity had vanished overnight as quantum resonance generators were deployed worldwide. Climate change was being reversed through large-scale atmospheric processors powered by clean fusion. Space agencies that had struggled with limited budgets now found themselves with unlimited energy for ambitious exploration projects. But the most profound change was in humanity's perspective on its place in the universe. The knowledge that Earth was not alone, that advanced civilizations were watching and waiting for younger species to achieve certain technological milestones, had fundamentally altered how humans saw themselves and their future. Dr. Chen, Dr. Wright approached her, carrying a tablet displaying the latest quantum signatures from space. "We're receiving another message. This one is much more complex than the first." Sarah took the tablet and studied the data. The quantum patterns were indeed more sophisticated, containing what appeared to be mathematical proofs and scientific formulas far beyond current human understanding. But embedded within the complex mathematics was something else: coordinates, pointing to a location just outside Earth's solar system. "They want to meet," Sarah said quietly. Elena joined them, her expression a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "The question is, are we ready? 6 weeks ago, we were struggling to create sustainable fusion in a garage. Now we're being invited to join some kind of galactic community. It's a lot to process." Sarah looked up at the night sky, knowing that somewhere out there, advanced beings were waiting to see how humanity would respond to the next great challenge in its development. The same principles that had driven her to refuse weaponizing her research now applied on a cosmic scale. How humanity chose to use this new knowledge, how it chose to present itself to the galactic community, would determine the future of the species. A new sound filled the air, the rhythmic beating of helicopter rotors. Sarah looked toward the landing pad and saw a formation of aircraft approaching, their lights cutting through the darkness. But these weren't military helicopters. They were civilian aircraft, carrying the international team of scientists, philosophers, and leaders who would help humanity prepare for its next evolutionary step. Among the passengers were former colleagues from Prometheus, including Dr. Marcus Webb. He had resigned from the facility the day after Sarah's research became public, citing a desire to work on projects that served humanity rather than those who would control it. Director Matthews had also resigned, though his reasons were more complex, a mixture of professional embarrassment and genuine regret for how the situation had been handled. As the helicopters touched down, Sarah felt a strange sense of completion. 3 months ago, she had been escorted from Prometheus in disgrace, her career apparently over, her research seemingly destined for misuse. Now she stood at the center of humanity's greatest adventure, surrounded by colleagues who shared her vision of science as a force for enlightenment rather than domination. Marcus was the first to approach her, his familiar smile wider than she'd seen it in years. "Sarah," he said, wrapping her in an unexpected hug. "I owe you an apology. You were right about everything. About the military applications, about the importance of principle, about the need to think beyond immediate practical concerns." "You don't owe me anything," Sarah replied. "You followed your conscience then, just as I followed mine. We all made the choices we thought were right at the time." "Maybe," Marcus said. "But your choices led to this moment, and humanity's future. My choices led to spending 3 months watching old episodes of science documentaries and wondering what I'd done with my life." Sarah laughed, the sound echoing across the facility grounds. For the first time in months, she felt genuinely happy. The weight of responsibility that had driven her to make such difficult choices was still there, but it was balanced now by the knowledge that those choices had led to something beautiful and transformative. Agent Harrison approached them, carrying a secure communication device that connected directly to mission control centers around the world. "Dr. Chen, we've received final authorization from the UN Security Council. The response message is ready for transmission." As the lead researcher on quantum resonance technology, the honor of sending humanity's first intentional message to an extraterrestrial civilization falls to you. Sarah took the device, feeling the weight of history in her hands. The message they had prepared was carefully crafted, expressing humanity's gratitude for the contact, its eagerness to learn and grow, and its commitment to using advanced technology for peaceful purposes. It was, in essence, humanity's application to join the galactic community. "Are you ready, Dr. Chen?" Agent Harrison asked. Sarah looked around at the faces surrounding her colleagues who had risked everything to pursue pure science, leaders who had chosen cooperation over competition, and ordinary people who had embraced the possibility of a future beyond their wildest dreams. In their expressions, she saw the same mixture of hope and determination that had driven her to stand up to the military-industrial complex at Prometheus. "We're ready," she said, and pressed the transmission key. The quantum resonance generators throughout the facility hummed to life, sending humanity's message across the void in patterns of pure energy that would reach their destination instantaneously. Somewhere among the stars, advanced beings would receive that message and decide whether humanity was worthy of the knowledge and friendship being offered. As the transmission completed, Sarah felt the ground beneath her feet vibrate slightly, not from the machinery, but from something else. In the distance, she could hear the sound that had given the story its name, rotor blades, but unlike any helicopter she had ever heard. These rotors beat with a deep, resonant rhythm that seemed to shake the very air. Looking up, she saw lights approaching from the night sky, not the harsh white beams of human aircraft, but gentle, multicolored illuminations that pulsed in harmony with the quantum signatures their equipment was detecting. Humanity's application had been accepted. The next chapter of the species story was about to begin. And Dr. Sarah Chen, who had once been escorted out of her workplace in disgrace for refusing to compromise her principles, now stood ready to welcome Earth's first extraterrestrial visitors as humanity's representative to the stars.